Hey everyone, so One Piece Chapter 1015 just came out. You may notice that this is not my usual setup. I was not planning to do a chapter review today because I'm on vacation, and I do not have my usual setup available. But then I read the chapter and I realized that I've just got to do a review because there was... the amount of highlights that came out of this chapter would be the cliffhangers to many other chapters, if that made sense. Like, I think that the chapter could have ended at 10 different points, and it would have been a great 10 out of 10 chapter, but it just kept going and going and going. Like, the Kinemon part could have easily been the climax. Even Sanji's part could have been the climax of the chapter. So let's just run through it. New viewers, just so you know, my usual setup is nicer than this. My setup is normally not this bad. I save that for the streams, but just stay tuned and hopefully you'll enjoy the content. So, from the start, I think the fact that Luffy's defeat was broadcasted, right? That happened last chapter. The fact that we got to see the reactions to all of that this chapter already made this a really juicy chapter from the start, because this is the first time, I think, in a long while that the Straw Hats have had to... The Straw Hats plus affiliated allies have had to hear about Luffy losing at a critical moment, right? We got that at the beginning in Act 1, right? And we got the reactions to that. They were very nonplussed by the thought that Luffy was defeated. Chopper even said at that point that Luffy's spirit won't be broken so easily. He said that in chapter 925, I believe. And now we have this chapter with, again, we're focusing on Chopper, interestingly. I don't know if there's any sort of reason that Oda did that. I said Odin, I think. I meant to say Oda, obviously. But you can understand why I might mix those two up. So, I don't think that there's any particular reason why Oda chose to focus on Chopper the two times when we got the news. Maybe it is just because Chopper is the naive little kid of the group, although he's obviously grown out of that to a degree. But maybe Chopper is just the most innocent one that we can kind of get an interesting little reaction out of. But very quickly, we were immediately told by Sanji that, cut that out. This is obviously not the end. And he pointed out all of the miracles that Luffy has accomplished so far and why they should have faith in Luffy. And that's something that's been reiterated over and over and over again in the New World. I mean, Sanji, of course, you can go back to Whole Cake Island when he explained to Pudding that there's a reason that they're always going to believe in Luffy and why he believed that Luffy would be the first one to defeat Katakuri. But just throughout the entire New World, Oda's made a point of having almost every Straw Hat just about come out and say that Luffy is going to be the Pirate King. There is nothing that is going to happen to stop that from happening. So Oda's really gone out of his way to make it clear that the Straw Hats' faith in Luffy is not going to be shaken so easily, right? So even the rest of the Alliance, you know, Kid, Marco, Law, etc., they're maintaining their faith as well. So Luffy has shown enough that these guys are not going to quit out on him so easily. So I'm going to save my thoughts on what all of that means in the direction that this is going for the end, but I did like getting to see all of the various reactions and kind of getting a reiteration or, I guess, repetition or reinforcement, I suppose, of the idea that everybody has seen enough from Luffy at this point to not doubt him so easily. It's very interesting based on Kaido's comment a couple chapters ago about how they're not going to lose hope unless they actually see their leader defeated. So interesting stuff to me. I've got a lot to say about Kaido coming out of this chapter, but again, we're going to save that stuff for the end. I think the first big highlight moment of the chapter for me was Sanji coming through. Let's take a moment to appreciate Sanji, because this man has gone through so much. The moment he just got felt a little reminiscent of the Enies Lobby moment, where he swooped in as the hunter. Enies Lobby moment was, in my opinion, much better, but this was at least a long overdue moment and a start for Sanji going down a, you know, hopefully a bit of, I don't want to say redemption arc, I'm not saying that he needs to be redeemed, but I know that Sanji fans, at the very least, want to see more action moments from him that kind of are reminiscent of what he was doing pre-time skip more frequently. So the Sanji moment I enjoyed, one, for the fact that it was a funny panel that came out of it, with Queen essentially being kicked in a sort of carousel basically around the floor, you know, and the neck being spun around the floor, right? So it was a funny moment, but also just the fact that it's a 2-for-1. So Sanji's stopping not only Queen but Perospero at the same time in a pretty creative way, basically just kicking Queen around to turn Queen into a bit of a giant umbrella. So definitely enjoyed that moment. I hope that Sanji fans are really happy about that, because it does look, you know, that was, I think, a much needed clutch, you know, return of the old Sanji that we've been waiting for, right? And it's kind of been a looming question of when is Sanji going to come back into the action? When is he going to make a big splash again? Oda kind of teased it a couple times with, oh, is Sanji going to go help the Scabbards? Is he going to go help the rooftop fight? Is he going to go to the live main floor? But at the end of the day, it looks like this is the main, you know, the main stage that Sanji is going to shine. So hopefully he gets more moments from here on out, but we've got to wait and see. So beyond that, beyond the Sanji moment, we had, I think, if that was the positive highlight of the chapter, we had a few down moments, right? And that came mostly from the Momonosuke section. I was thinking, and I mentioned last chapter review, that I thought that this might be the chapter where Kinemon dies and we get a Kinemon death scene. I was happily wrong, because it looks like Oda is going to really take his time. If Kinemon is going to die, Oda is really going to take his time to give Kinemon that sort of farewell, because if we did just cut from last chapter to a full death scene for Kinemon this chapter, I think we wouldn't have just gotten enough time for Kinemon. But the fact that last chapter was the setup to Kinemon dying, I'm not going to say that Kinemon's dying for sure, but I'm just saying if this is the direction things are going, I like the fact that last chapter, 1014, was the setup for Kinemon dying. This chapter was was literally, turning in the knife and twisting it, right? And basically giving us that sort of sinking feeling that this might be it for the character. I really, really like the fact that Oda is reminding us of the dynamic and the relationship between Momonosuke and Kinemon up to this point. And Kinemon, just the imagery of Kinemon, like poor little Kinemon, who's so far out of his league, facing off against a monster like Kaido. That entire scene just felt so intimidating and so like an ant trying to fight against a dragon. But, Kinemon, even though he's basically on the brink of death, he's still trying to get his pokes in against Kaido. He's still trying to stab Kaido. He's still trying to do everything in his very limited power to make this a salvage, to make this a situation where Momonosuke can get away. So, I don't know. I think the flashbacks that we got for Kinemon were not my favorite personally, just because I would have preferred to actually gotten a couple moments that, it depends. I think lots of times when Oda does these flashbacks, he mixes in moments where we actually got to see these little flashback panels in the actual manga, and we're getting reminders of that, and then new moments that we haven't seen before. So think back to the Going Merry, right? So the Going Merry, I believe it had a solid mix of flashbacks between little things that we've seen of the Going Merry, and then little glimpses of stuff we didn't see, essentially off-screen bonding moments between the Straw Hats and the Going Merry. I might be a little off on that, maybe go double check, but I do think that at least with a lot of death scenes, Oda does like to do a little bit of a mix. So, Kinemon, I think all the little clips we got were essentially sort of filling in the gaps between how the Momonosuke-Kinemon father-son dynamic developed in between the time skip, right? So I think it was nice seeing that. I do think that next chapter, at the very least, soon, we are going to be getting a full-on Kinemon death scene, and I hope that this one really sticks. Kiku and Kanjuro, I got nothing to say. I don't know for sure if that's happening. But just the entire imagery of that little sequence of events of Kinemon trying to, put his last breath into taking down Kaido, and Kaido just this monstrous, menacing, dark, shadowy figure, easily crushing him and basically trying to stomp out all hope. Really, really, really great stuff. Which brings us to the next part, which is Voice of All Things stuff is just going off the rails. I really, really want to get the details on this ability, because there's so many questions that are coming out. So just the fact that, first of all, Momonosuke was able to hear Luffy and relay his message to the entire alliance, that is a very exciting turn of events for Momo's character. It is a sudden sharp shift into, suddenly Momo can actually do things and be very effective, and he has this ability that nobody else really has, except for maybe Luffy. But he has this ability that nobody else really has to a degree among the rest of the alliance, that is actually going to come into significant use as a leader. That's what I'm seeing here at the very least, or at least that's the direction that I feel Momonosuke is going. He can rally the troops in a way that maybe other leaders can't, simply because he can hear the entire battlefield. He can speak to the entire battlefield because he knows everything that's going on. So the Voice of All Things is actually a really, really cool leadership ability. I love the fact that he was able to announce to everybody that Luffy's still in it, Luffy is going to come back, Luffy is going to try and defeat Kaido. And I like the fact that the way that Luffy was saved, it wasn't something really particularly strange like Carp or whatever. I mentioned on stream, and I think in the last review, that the Carp was my personal preferred solution, but I think that the submarine is the more, I guess, clearly set up logical solution that more people will be happy with and not be mad that plot armor or whatever. It is plot armor to a degree, but come on, it's a submarine, it's gonna be following Onigashima, right? They're gonna see Luffy's contacting them through some ability, etc., potentially Voice of All Things. All of that stuff, it just feels a little more, like there's nothing to really complain about there, right? It's not like the Carp are just choosing to be friends with Luffy because Luffy's Luffy. Although I would like that, I wouldn't complain about that, but I get why I think a lot more people would be okay with this sort of resolution to that little Luffy falling moment. Now, as for the direction that I think things are going to go, obviously Luffy's going to get back in the fight, and obviously Luffy's going to give one more go against Kaido. First, we're going to get to see Yamato versus Kaido, I think, in the meantime. I think that's really, really, really important to getting us invested in actually what Yamato's been through and why she is involved in this, if this is the final battle, why such a late game addition to the story is involved in the final battle. This next sequence of events, I think, is going to be very important for Yamato's character. Hopefully we get some flashbacks, not just of Yamato, but maybe of Kaido a little bit. If Yamato is set up to be the next big stride like people are hoping, maybe we even get something like a sandwich flashback like we did with Law and Doflamingo, where you get the outer buns of Law's flashback and the inner juicy meat of Kaido's flashback. I think that would be a good way to set things up, but we are also so in the flow of the climactic battle, if you think that's what this is. We're also in the flow of this climactic battle that I do think it would take us out a little bit if we took too long of a flashback to explore something like really sad and drawn out. So I'm interested to see how Oda can really flesh out Yamato in a short amount of time without disrupting the flow of current events. And beyond that, the next series of events, so a lot of people saying that isn't this clear that the raid is not going to fail. By the way, I saved the raid failing stuff for the end of the chapter reviews now because I know a lot of people are tired of me talking about it, but then at the same time, if I don't talk about it, there's going to be a lot of people asking, what do you think about the raid failing? So I got to manage things a little bit. Let's say I'm going to keep it towards the end of the chapter reviews again from here on before I mention raid failing. Yeah, I definitely think it's going to fail. I think that to me, this chapter, I guess it felt a little too self-aware or on the nose or kind of checking off boxes in the sense that literally the cycle that happened this chapter was start of the chapter was everyone saying Luffy's gonna lose, and then 10 pages later it's everyone being like, of course Luffy's gonna win. Even Sanji just referencing like, no Chopper, this happens all the time, just think of all the miracles. That stuff on the surface you could say, well no, isn't that Oda just reminding us that this is just how things go? Everyone feels down for a moment because Luffy lost, everyone feels up when we hear that Luffy's gonna win. We didn't even see Luffy lose. Like, you think that that's the big defeat that Oda set up for us? A moment like, oh, a half chapter cycle of people feeling down and then feeling back up positivity wise after a defeat that we never even got to see? I don't know. Maybe that is the case. I think it was an effective chapter regardless, but I'm reading Kaido's words and it just feels like an interesting direction that it could be headed to me, which is Kaido predicted this. You can go back a few chapters after Kaido defeated Luffy off screen, a defeat that we didn't really get to see, right? So it was just a generic check off the box off-screen defeat. Kaido saying, well, this one, they're not even really going to care. They're not going to lose hope unless they actually see their leader defeated. That's what Kaido said. And then this very next chapter, you actually see exactly what he said play out. They're not going to believe that Luffy's down and out of it until they actually see it with their own eyes. And on top of that, this chapter Kaido's talking about sometimes you just have to learn, not an exact quote, right? I'm paraphrasing. Sometimes you just have to learn to accept defeat. So to me, this is an ominous direction this is heading. This is nothing new. Kaido expected this. It is very rare for a villain right off the bat to, like, you haven't seen this with any other One Piece villain, for the villain to acknowledge that the little defeat that they just gave doesn't mean that much and that it's not actually going to shake the fate of the Alliance or us, the readers, right? So that is very interesting. The fact that Kaido seems to be foreshadowing the idea that no, you are going to have to learn to accept defeat at a certain point. I'm very excited for that, and this chapter did a lot to get me excited for Kaido as a character. I think he's a very quotable villain, which is always good. His dialogue has become very interesting, and I think just every time he's talking at this point, he's kind of talking heavy, so it's just, I don't know, he's a very entertaining character to have on panel again. I think there were some points, I guess, in the last, maybe the early on Onigashima, where Kaido seemed a little vulnerable to a degree, but at this point, it feels like he's turning into a very, very interesting, complex villain with his own sort of school of thought of, like, just the fact that he even is thinking about things like Joy Boy, thinking about things like how he wants to die, thinking about things like how far will Luffy's sailing go. There's clearly a lot more on his mind, like a much grander picture that he has in his mind and of what he wants to do in his life and accomplish, and how he views potential challengers for that same throne or same goal that he's pushing for. So I'm really excited to see more of Kaido. I mean, I'm just saying exactly what he said would happen, which is, no, this defeat doesn't really count because they're not going to feel the defeat unless they actually see him defeated. And that's exactly what happened this chapter. They hear Luffy was defeated, then they rally back because, of course, no, Luffy wouldn't be defeated so easily. Off-screen loss, Luffy's coming right back probably next couple chapters. I don't know, guys. So I'm along for the ride. I'm not saying the raid has to fail, etc. I just am voicing my beliefs why I actually think that this chapter does continue to set us up for that direction. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. We'll find out. I think that this chapter was a really good chapter, 10 out of 10 chapter regardless, tons of highlight moments, and at the very least it got me really, really pumped to see what's up next, and pumped to see Luffy come back and give another go at Kaido. So, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and the quality will be better, of course, next time as usual.